I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. This is the Hornady Podcast, and I'm your host, Seth. Thanks for tuning in on this episode. On today's show, I've got a couple guests sitting across the table from me. Marketeer Preston Lentfer, project engineer, all things muzzleloader, and then some, Ryan Damman. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Excited to be here.
You changed your intro again.
A little bit, change it up a little bit.
I guess.
Keep the people guessing.
Yeah, they noticed on the last one.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
That we changed up the intro.
Well, I just kind
Very
of
astute listeners.
just say things
willy-nilly.
willy-nilly, as
Throw
it
it
turns
at the
out.
wall. See what sticks.
Well, I mean, largely this podcast has just been kind of willy-nilly and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, you're not joking.
No, that's the truth. Well, today's episode was one of those things where you're like, oh my gosh, it's hunting season. The hunting season is going to continue, and then we get into trade show season. So we're going to be gone a lot.
Holidays.
Well, the holidays, yeah, you throw in the holidays, you throw in trade shows, you throw in hunts and stuff going on. We were talking about what we could do, and it just, bam, hit us. Lightning bolt. It for Nebraska and other states have their muzzleloading season prior to like their gun seasons, which makes sense. I don't know why Nebraska's backwards. They put the more primitive seasons first, which makes sense. Nebraska, kind of the opposite. Either way, we're about to be in Nebraska's 31-day muzzleloader season, and we kind of take some things for granted in the muzzleloader world, and Ryan's done a lot to advance the muzzleloading world, and I want to take today and really dissect how you can take the economical, the affordable, the muzzleloader you already have, and set that thing up to be a precision modern muzzleloader. Because it can be done, and it can be done pretty affordably, and the level of precision and accuracy that you can get at non-traditional muzzleloader distances increases pretty greatly if you just do some small things correctly. So we're going to talk through that, and for the listeners out there that have an upcoming gun season or muzzleloader season, you likely don't need to go out and buy something new. You might already have it. It's just the way you use it that can set this thing up correctly. So we're going to talk about that. Before we get there, I do want to mention right now today, Hornady.com, for those viewing, we've got the podcast sticker sheet. Check them out. They're available right now. We're going to hopefully get these out to some of the trade shows to give them away to people, but you can get them at Hornady.com. And it's just a fun sticker sheet of the Hornady podcast. So we've got In Miles We Trust, Quinlan's Corner, and some other really cool podcast logos. So get your sticker sheet.
Miles isn't here right now to defend himself, but I don't know if I'd want to put Miles's face on anything.
Hey, those O'Neill boys, they trust in Miles, and now they can
they
prove
ought to
it.
tag their whole stuff, all their stuff with it.
Right. So, yeah, maybe we should do some giveaways with some sticker sheets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll figure that out.
Yeah, let's noodle that a little bit. Now, getting back to the topic at hand, getting into muzzleloaders. So, in our generation, what we call kind of traditional muzzleloading, traditional inline muzzleloading, is actually modern. That's modern muzzleloading, is the inline stuff. But we've advanced now, and we kind of call that traditional or maybe traditional inline. And there were some huge advances made with those inline muzzleloaders, largely the ignition system, the introduction of a breech plug, and using the 209 primer. That was paramount because one of the things that can dramatically affect accuracy and consistency is the ignition. You've probably seen that in your testing as well.
Yeah, dramatically. I mean, that's probably the biggest source of variability there if you don't use the right components. And yeah, the newest bullets we got out, the board driver line, helps progress your capabilities there if and only if you make some decisions on propellant and the proper primer to ignite that propellant.
Yeah. So you have to have good ignition. Alliterations aside, it's very important. And so the 209 and the breech plug mechanism that, between Thompson Center and a few other companies that they really brought that to the forefront, that is paramount. Then you look at the propellant. So, you had your old triple F, double F black powder substitute or just straight up black powder. And then in that rise of what I'm going to call traditional inline muzzleloading, you have Pyrodex. You've got the pellets starting to be, more and more popular. Some other, more modern, cleaner burning, easier to ignite propellants. And then you have all of that technology culminating with Blackhorn 209, the kind of the ultimate black powder substitute. But those propellants in the more modern chemistry, they ignite a little bit better velocity spreads, better cold temperature performance, and they're going to burn a little cleaner, which in a muzzleloader, man, that is the single worst part of shooting a muzzleloader is cleaning, in my opinion. So if I can get more shots without having to clean and they're not caustic and they're not, eroding the bore and stuff, I'm all for that. And so we saw that, with white hots and the like I said, the 777 pellets and stuff. That also helped advance that traditional inline muzzle loading to where things became a lot more consistent and a lot easier for the shooter and the hunter to buy components and really take out some of the variables of what was traditional muzzle loading with, then you go way old school and flintlock and all that kind of stuff.
Percussion caps.
Was real big.
That's what I started with, percussion caps. And at that time, Nebraska only allowed you to use a 1X optic or open sights.
Yep.
So ours had open sights. And I would suggest, if I remember correctly, and maybe it's just because my brother claims he missed the buck of a lifetime because the muzzleloader didn't go off, that thing didn't go off half the time.
Yeah. And
it was a struggle. Then we kind of moved. I got my first inline. So nowadays, they all have kind of a quick breach. You just turn it by hand, or if it gets real stuck, there's a tool you can put in there. But mine was a breech plug similar to that, but you did have to screw it in with a tool. A long tool. Yep. I still have it to this day. It's a Traditions.
Shoots well.
Shoots really well. I mean, if you looked at that bore with the bore scope, which I've done, which I wish I wouldn't have, you wouldn't think that it should shoot as well as it should. But that started its life on Pyrodex pellets because that was easy. Oh, yeah. It was consistent. Yeah. Arguably for a late teenager, early 20s guy, safer,
I'm not going to mess this up. It says 2 pellets. I put 2 pellets in there.
Yes, sir.
And I feel like that is really one of the things that makes it more approachable to the average hunter. Because, I shoot a high power rifle. I put in my 243 rounds and I close the bolt. But that's real simple. Well, you want me to weigh granular powder? And there's just some bars of entry to muzzle loading that can be a little bit daunting. But if it's as simple as, I just put 2 of these and I just drop them in this tube and I just shove a bullet on top of it, that's pretty easy. And with those advancements, there's some modern bullets like our SST, for example. You put them in a sabot or a sabot or a sabot. You put them in there, it just really made things simple. And we had those speed load sabots, still do. It's a sabot with a stick that you put 2 pellets on. You drop the whole assembly down there, makes it really convenient. And that afforded the muzzleloader hunter what used to be inconsistent ignition, like you mentioned, Preston, huge velocity spreads, and maybe 100, 125 yard performance. Those inline muzzleloaders with the pellets and the new bullets and sabots and stuff like that, that made it easier, better ignition, better velocity spreads, and got people, in some cases, 200, maybe 250 yard performance. For sure, 150 to 200 yards right out of the box, ready to go. That was a huge advancement.
Yeah, my longest shot was 160 yards back when I had that set up. And that was with a 3x9 with a BDC reticle. And that was a lucky shot. But all I wanted was to have the reliability that I wanted with 100 and a quarter yard accuracy, where my other one just wouldn't go off sometimes.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
So you can take that same system that we're talking about with, the modern inline muzzleloader, and you can set that thing up where instead of 150 to 200 yard performance, you can have honest performance, 200, 250, out to 300, and sometimes even further, depending on the conditions. That's pretty impressive. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about that specifically, but I want to walk through a system that you can do economically that you might already have, and what knobs you can turn to turn that traditional inline muzzleloader into a true precision machine. And it's really not as hard as you think, and it's going to start with picking a muzzleloader, of course. Now, if you already have one, then you have one. But if you don't, what I would recommend, you don't have to spend a ton of money, although you can, But what I'd recommend first is you do yourself a favor and you opt for a 45 caliber if it's legal for the game you're hunting where you're at, which is most animals in most states. And the reason for that, Ryan can talk more to this, weight for weight, bullet length for bullet length, you just get a more efficient bullet in 45 caliber.
Yeah, just from the get-go, dropping down from 50 cal, you just get a slipperier projectile.
Longer ogive.
Longer ogive. You don't have as much surface area for the wind to push that thing around.
Yep. Higher BC, essentially.
Higher BC, yeah. It's just more ballistically efficient.
Yep. And that makes sense, I think, to a lot of our users that Hornady's always been of the mindset, let's let the bullet do the work. Velocity's cool. We're going to have some velocity, but the bullet is going to hang on to that velocity if we use an efficient bullet design. And just opting for 45 over 50 caliber, you're going to have higher BCs, all thing equal.
Especially in this scenario where you're kind of limited on how much velocity you can get.
Yeah,
you know?
Safely. And you don't need to be hot rodding anything, especially in this, in the black powder world.
Yeah,
so
100%.
I would say if you don't already have a muzzle loader, the first thing you can do is opt for a 45 caliber. I really think that does a world of good. Now, when it comes to picking a muzzle loader, I mentioned you can go, sky's the limit. You can go custom built muzzle loader, spend thousands, but you really don't have to. And Preston and I did a hunt in Kansas, and I used a muzzle loader that was purchased at the Walmart for $290, and that thing was set up for honest 250, 275 yard performance. That one was in 50 caliber. Now in 45 caliber, there's more and more available this year than any other year prior. And you don't have to spend a ton. We've had really great luck with the Traditions Striker Fire. The Traditions with the Striker Fire, you can pick them up for around $400, maybe $450. That muzzleloader, great ignition system, and it's in 45 caliber with the proper twist rate to shoot these modern bullets. We've also had really good luck with a little bit on the higher end side, the CVA MRX. Those things are closer to $550 to $600. Adjustable cheek piece, not a super long barrel, but they're middle of the road, and you can go even more budget friendly than that should you want to, but definitely opt for 45 over 50 in my opinion.
Yeah, big fan of that. And yeah, like you said, you can go cheaper than that. You can go way more expensive than that. Mm-hmm. But you don't necessarily have to. We're trying to tell you which knobs to turn to make an economical muzzleloader shoot longer.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there will be more and more 45 cal rifles available in the coming years, just with hopefully with our board driver that we just released. Traditionally, you ask anybody that has muzzleloader, most of the time they got 50 cals. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that's just projectile and just the legacy item availability.
Yep. This is a new era.
You get, so the bullets that are available will be stable in the guns that people are making. And I think that'll just lend itself to progressing. More people are going to make guns. You're going to have more, that price range is going to come down.
Sure.
I mean, you can go out now and buy 50 cal CVA Wolf for $200.
Yeah.
And you could back in the day too.
Yeah.
And they shoot unchanged.
Well.
Yeah.
But I think there's going to be 45 cal versions of that.
Yep.
No reason not to.
What's kind of interesting is like in Nebraska, our muzzleloader law, and like you said, check state to state, but ours is 44 caliber or larger. If you go to Colorado, you can use a 45 caliber, but not for extremely big game, elk, moose. Yep.
You made a good point just on regulations overall. They vary widely by state. So propellant, projectile use, sabo or non-sabo, all that stuff. Optics. Just make sure you check. Yes, optics. Make sure you're up to speed on
your own where you're going to hunt.
That goes without. Yeah, that goes without saying.
I just thought I'd know that.
Board Driver ELDX. Fast and easy to load. The polymer base seals the bore and engages the rifling while the post and pedals grip the bullet's boat tail. With its superior ballistic coefficients and reduced drag, the Board Driver ELDX drives its 340 grain bullet to target with the energy and accuracy that turns shots into success. When you have one shot this muzzleloader season, make it count and use the best. Board Driver ELDX from Hornady.
So you pick the muzzleloader out or you already have one. Again, those are just a couple options that we've had good luck with on personal notes. The other thing is from the get-go, you want to make sure that the muzzleloader you're buying either comes factory equipped with or is available aftermarket with a breech plug that allows you to use Blackhorn 209. And I would love Ryan to talk more about that because you've seen the results of that. But I mentioned earlier, as far as propellants go, things culminated to Blackhorn 209. There are no other propellants out there that we've tested that ignite easier or ignite more uniformly, have better cold temperature performance, provide better velocity spreads, and better accuracy. Like, it's everything you want in a black powder substitute.
Yeah, and that is a little bit of an elephant in the room, and I do want you to talk about that. But yes, we know it is very hard to find, and it is quite expensive.
It hurts. Yeah. I just bought some, but it hurt, but there is no substitute. Right. If you want the best performance, that is the propellant.
Yeah, so if you're, like, this whole conversation based around, I want to extend my performance, extend my range with a...
Well, not just extend the range. I want to be able to shoot smaller groups at every range.
Enhance your performance. You get tighter groups, more consistent, more of a precision setup.
Right.
So you're starting with bullet choice, and then, okay, how can I launch that projectile in order to maximize its capabilities? There is no other option available today than Blackhorn 209. The pellets are inconsistent. Any other substitute, traditionally the Pyrodex, White Hots, 777, loose or pelletized, it's not, just doesn't have the juice to launch these projectiles at
the way you want it,
the way we want, and consistency in the way dirtier than Blackhorn. So the shot-to-shot building groups and shot-to-shot consistency will degrade because, I got 4 shots on this.
I have to swab
I got to swab this thing. It's getting pretty tough to get a bullet down there. So back to what you need on Blackhorn 209 is breech plugs. Certain gun manufacturers offer a Blackhorn specific breech plug, and the main difference is the length of your flash hole channel from primer to where that powder sits. Trying to cut that distance.
Yep. You want to get all that flame
give
temperature.
Your primer the best chance to ignite that powder.
Okay. Because
with that loose powder, your powder columns are getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a little harder to ignite that.
Okay. And most muzzle loaders now come equipped right out of the box with a breech plug that's going to allow you the use of Blackhorn 209. It'll say in the instruction manual, call the manufacturer, of course, but definitely make that decision. And you mentioned the pellets being inconsistent just from the amount of propellant in the pellet.
Yeah, I did that test way back when we were doing the first bore driver, just physically weighing a box of pellets. And you get like a 14 grain variation in a box of 50 pellets. Yeah, it doesn't make me feel good about consistency there.
As far as the next thing that goes about propellant, whether you're using Blackhorn 209 or any other granular thing, we highly recommend you weigh the propellant on a scale rather than volumetrically. Back in the day when those modern inlines came out, fill it up to 100 volumetric grains and that's what you put in there. Well, that's not always the best way. I just did a test, just real quick, threw 10 charges volumetrically, as flat as I could get them. I had them in a little holder on what are those level pieces of granite or whatever.
Yeah.
Forget what they're called. But a dead straight, super heavy, flat surface. And I eyeballed it perfect, right even with the 100 grain mark, volumetric. Pulled it out, weighed it. On 10 charges, I had a 3.8 grain total variance. And that's on 10. So I was only going to get worse if I did 30 or 50. So just by that, just the nature of inconsistency there, we recommend you weigh it on a scale.
Yep, exactly. If you got the tubes, any version of a tube that seals up, you pre-weigh those, pre-throw them. You go out in the field with those tubes ready to go. Takes the worry out of it when you're trying to, I'm dumping powder in the field and trying to get a semi-accurate volumetric measurement. You don't got to worry about that. Yeah, it's a little bit more time up front, but it's not that big a deal.
No,
it's well worth the advantage.
And if you're a hand loader for center fire, you already have a scale that weighs in grains. If you don't, there's very economical options.
Yeah, we sell them. The G2,
G3
or
1500.
G3, excuse me.
Yeah,
G3 trickle compatible,
fantastic.
Battery operated. You could take it with you. You could take it if you're on a destination hunt. You get to the hotel or wherever you're at. You can find a way to weigh your powder, and you're going to have better velocity spreads when you weigh the propellant. And better velocity spreads as you increase time of flight is going to be smaller groups at range.
All of it. I mean, it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
I take that I have a limited number of tubes. I don't know why I've never bought any more, but I
because they were never available on Midway. I've been waiting to buy them.
So I have a limited number, but in my muzzleloader kit, I've got that G3 1500 and a tub of my powder ready to go. Should I need more than the 6 shots?
Shouldn't.
Yeah.
So propellant, that's a big one. We know it's expensive. We know it hurts when you're buying an 8-ounce can. Come on, Blackhorn.
I think
they
it used to be 10.
Come on. So they're 8-ounce cans and they're really expensive, but it is quite simply the best. There is no substitute for the performance you get from that propellant. Moving on to the next thing that you can do to turn your regular muzzleloader into a real precision instrument. Talked about ignition. It's the ignition. You have to select the correct primer. Ryan, you have designed our bore driver FTX, the bore driver ELDX, now in 45 caliber. You've done a ton of testing. You have found there is a number one primer, no substitute for that primer. You found a somewhat close second, and then there's literally everything else way down the line.
Yep.
Let's talk about the primers that you see have given you the best performance, the best velocity spreads, and the best ignition.
Yeah. So if you're using Blackhorn, trying to get this whole setup, as we're talking about, CCI 209 Magnums.
Mm-hmm. Hard to find primer.
They're hard to find, but they are definitely top.
Yeah.
Top, your number one choice if you can find it.
The 209 Magnum.
They're a true Magnum.
Says it right on the box in red letters, and they're only available through CCI.
209M for Magnum. They say Magnum right there on the box.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely different than a standard 209 primer, and your results will be different.
Yeah, velocity spreads are going to tighten up.
Velocity spreads are tighter. You get a little bit more velocity over the number 2 choice, Federal 209As, which are not marketed as a
muzzle
true Magnum primer, but my experience, they got a little more go than a 209.
Okay.
So those are top 2. CCI 209 Magnum, Federal 209As. Everything else,
don't even waste your time.
Anything that's marketed as a quote-unquote muzzleloader primer or ML or MZ, no, don't bother.
Yep.
Not recommended.
I used to be crazy and reload shot shells, so I had a brick of Winchester 209 primers on there. Not muzzleloader primers, but shotgun primers. Those always worked well for me. I should have tried to find some Magnums.
Well, you might try. Maybe the Winchesters might, they might be up
actually,
there.
the reason I did that is because back before Blackhorn was acquired by Hodgdon, I called. It was Accurate, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And spoke to the guy there, and he said, "Well, if you can't get the 250s, your Winchester 209s will be just fine, or your Federals." And so I tried them, and that's what I stuck with. I don't even think I have the right breech plug for it. Funny story
in
my old muzzleloader. Funny story about that. You know how there's a channel before it gets to that tinier hole? I didn't know that existed.
Because it was so full.
Because it's so full. So I had to get a drill bit out and then get all that out of there.
That's a good point.
Good point here. Take that breech plug out. Don't be afraid to put that in a sonic cleaner.
The drill bit trick is there's a special drill bit size. I cannot remember the size specifically, but just
probably
run that in there by
hand.
For a welder, you might be able to get one of those.
The torch cleaning.
Yeah, torch cleaning.
Those, definitely for a flash hole. That's a good point overall. Make sure breech plugs are clean and dry.
Dry is a big one.
Yeah, because a little bit of leftover solvent or whatever you're using to clean in there, you'll have issues. You'll have inconsistent ignition, incomplete ignition. And
Got it.
You don't want to have that when you're hunting.
So weigh your propellant out there. The CCI 209M if you can, and if you can't, the Federal 209A. Everything else we've just seen in our testing, more velocity spread, less consistent ignition, larger groups at range. So that's just what we have found. So from there, you got your muzzle loader, you got the breech plug, you got the propellant, you got the right primer in there. And then this is the one where this next knob to turn is really like the on-off switch. Simply choose a really good low drag bullet. And I talked about 45 cal. Ryan, you came up with this one. We just launched it this year. The 45 caliber bore driver ELDX, 280 grain bullet, incredibly low drag, high BC bullet. You can go from doing all the things we talked about and shooting a really inefficient bullet. And yes, it will be better, But if you want to take this thing to 11, you put in the ELDX bullet. And let's talk about that ELDX, because there are some other bullets on the market that have really similar shape, but they're not the same bullet. And let's talk about what goes into the bore driver ELDX, why it is just inherently accurate with the mechanism of manufacture, the cup and core design, versus something, say, like a plated bullet.
Yeah. This goes back to the initial design of the first bore driver when we did even the 290 FTX. Once we figured out how to attach that skirt to the base, that was a big part of it. But the other part was we want to make a purpose-built muzzleloading projectile for hunting that's not just a chunk of pure soft lead with copper plate around it.
Yeah.
We want to use it we want to make that just like we make ELDXs, ELD Match, SSTs, all
truly accurate bullets.
Our proven hunting bullets. We know how to draw a good jacket, a thick, heavy, and there's a compromise with muzzler bullets. It's not going to be heavy as a interlock or a ELDX, but there's reasons there.
Fast.
Yeah, there's a velocity regime you got to operate in, but we want to build those jackets in a projectile the same manner as we do all of our other rifle bullets. So this 45 cal was no different. We built that start to finish. This is going to be 45 cal muzzleloaders. We know we got to put a hole in the bottom to accept the skirt, but we know, I assume this is going to be launched a little bit faster, especially in the CVA Paramount world, which we didn't even talk about.
Well, those are like super plus Magnum.
Super Magnum loads, and guys are launching these 2,300-ish feet a second.
Yeah. The stuff that we talked about earlier, I'm talking 70 grains, 75 grains Wade, which is your standard, kind of 100 to 120 grain volumetric.
Yeah. Then you want to add another 30 grains on top of that for those super Magnum loads. But so where I was going, those bullets are going to see a little bit higher velocity. So we built that jacket a little bit more robust, good heavy interlock in there. The internal geometry of that is designed to be able to handle those terminal situations.
Excellent.
And it's just going to be a lot more robust. We have a lot more integrity compared to a thinly plated piece of pure lead.
Right. And that's so important. The plated bullets, they can be good for some things, but they usually expand a little quick. And generally, they don't always shoot that well because that plating can be thicker on one side than the other. You can have a non-concentric projectile. That's no good. So if you're really trying to maximize your system, even if you're not interested in anything extended range, you're only interested in, say, 200 yards and in, but you want to be able to shoot smaller groups, do all the things we talked about, and shoot like our bore driver. You did a wonderful job with that skirt mechanism. It has a redundant engagement, so when it goes to seal up and really spin that bullet up, it grips tight in the barrel. The bullet's obturating, the skirt's obturating. It's engaged inside the bullet as well. So you get really complete spin up and you get good accuracy at any range. Yep. Awesome. So those things there. Yeah, well done. Those things right there that we talked about, maybe opting for a 45 cal over a 50, making sure you're shooting Blackhorn 209 if you're really looking for performance, making sure you got the right breech plug to use Blackhorn 209, making sure it's clean and dry, of course, the right primer to ignite the whole show, and then you put the ultimate in ballistic design as a bullet in front of it. Those things right there are going to take you from, it's an inline muzzleloader and it shoots 150 yards, 200 yards maybe, to 200 yards is now easy, 250, and even out to 300 yards and beyond in some cases, which is remarkable from where we came from. One other point, though, muzzleloaders as a whole, velocities are slow. And so the trajectory is not what you're used to when you're shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 22-250 or 7 mag, right? Those things are ultra flat in comparison to the muzzleloader world, regardless of how efficient the bullets are in these muzzleloaders. So the trajectories are just a little bit more dramatic, overstated, if you will. You have more correction at every range. And we're going to talk about that specifically. I know you took down some comparison notes, but it's much easier to compensate for that bullet drop if you have a scope that has a turret you can grab and trust. And when you need 10 minutes of correction, you need 4 mils of correction, whatever it is, and you dial to 4 mils, it moves 4 mils. It makes that correction so much easier than going, it says it drops 28 inches, so I think that BDC dot, that if you're trying to maximize precision and also try to extend that range into the 200 yards and beyond, you really should consider a scope that has a good turret on there. Those are going to be a little bit more expensive, and those prices have come down recently. But in my opinion, if you're really trying to dress one of these muzzleloaders up as a precision instrument, a scope with a turret will do worlds of good. Now, choosing the right bullet will help you. At 250 yards, the difference between a bore driver ELDX and a bore driver FTX can be a couple of feet. So we're talking 24 inches. But again, a turret's going to make that a little bit easier. And Ryan, I'd love to hear what you took down for numbers just as a comparison.
Oh, I was just at rough numbers, assuming 100 yard zero and a standard-ish load, nothing crazy, just to compare these bullets. Look at the 45 cal. Let's do the bore driver ELDX 50 cal, 340 grain.
Okay, the first one.
Even compared to the FTX bore driver,
which is a great bullet,
which is similar to the standard industry 50 cal bore diameter bullet. I mean, just from 100 250 yards, you're about a foot difference.
So within 200 yards, you're already flatter by a foot.
That's starting at 100 being the same zero. So, wow,
that's impressive.
You're talking pushing 3 feet when you get out to 350 yards. So
that's a yardstick, my man.
You start talking about wind. Don't even mention wind drift there.
Yeah, because that's a huge factor as well.
Big factor. But the improvement. Let's look at the improvement of the 45 cal ELDX over even the 340 50 cal.
So just now, this is comparing ELDX to ELDX, apples to apples. But consider going 45 cal over 50, and here's why.
Yeah, now it's not as dramatic. They're both in their league. They're as good as you can get. But say you had 100 yard zero, you've been trying to make a 300 yard shot. You have a 6-inch flatter trajectory with the 45 cal. All else being equal, and that's not even standing on these things very hard.
No, from a velocity standpoint, that's
a big deal.
That's a big deal.
So
that's pretty impressive. So there's more reason to go 45 cal over 50, all things equal, just like we said, just from that. And then more reason to go bore driver ELDX over something like an SST or FTX. Now, those are great bullets. Both of those options are fantastic. Terminal performance, accuracy is good, but if you're trying to push the range envelope a little bit, you need something more efficient. If you're shooting inside of 200 yards, maybe inside of 150, that 290 grain FTX hits like a freight train. Remember down to Kansas?
It's very accurate too.
Yeah.
Insane.
That's what I recommend everybody. Just like you said, if you know your hunting location and setup is you're 200 yards, no way, that's a crazy far shot. I'm not gonna make a 200 yard shot. If you're one of those guys and it's a 100 yard ball game, 290 FTX is probably where you want to be. That bullet was designed for those velocities, for those types of situations.
Oh yeah, main man Judd back here behind the camera, bam! He crushed a giant whitetail with it on film, no less. And you could see
it right up in
the
here.
ripples. That bullet performs well. We shot a nice whitetail buck in Kansas with it. They hit hard, and accuracy was bullet on top of bullet on top of bullet, which is pretty cool. Any other notes that you took on this regard?
Oh, not necessarily on that. Like you mentioned, having a scope gives you the ability to dial is big. I mean, we're talking in the ball game of 3 mils dialing 4 to 14 minutes angle MOA. Whereas you're not usually dealing with that kind of elevation drop when you're, say, like you said, a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 143 LDX. You're not dealing with that much drop.
No, 2.7 mils on my Creedmoor is 500 yards.
Yeah.
So it definitely worlds apart. It's kind of hard to shift gears.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate, and then I'm going to come around to agree with you.
Okay.
If you don't have a scope that has a reliable turret, it can be done with a BDC reticle.
Yeah.
Or some reticles are just mil, or some reticles are just MOA. If you truly know those reticles, memorize them. If it's second focal plane, you put that sucker where
You need
that
to,
it needs to be, right?
Mhm.
First focal plane, no big deal. But if you have a reticle, it can be done. I saw my main man do it, and we'll get
Of course,
to that.
yep.
But it can be done. If you dial, though, your aiming error can be so much less.
That's true.
Especially when we're talking these kind of numbers, compared to a center fire.
Yep.
That's important.
Yep.
Did you know that Hornady has a full line of reloading tools and equipment? Whether you're brand new to the reloading game or a seasoned veteran, we have tools that will work awesome with your setup. Check out all of Hornady's reloading tools at Hornady.com.
Well, let's shift before we wrap this podcast up. A little story time, if you will. Now, I think we've documented this on the podcast.
I think
Maybe
we talked about it.
But
Probably.
you, Ryan, you finished up your bore driver ELDX task, and the first one was the 50 caliber, and that was a big ask. Hey, we want to make the ELDX and everything that does, which was one of our most advanced and technologically difficult bullets that we manufacture. We want to do that in a giant 50 caliber bullet. That's a big ask. You're a good engineer. You got it done. You go on a hunt to use the bullet that you just finished doing the work on. Let's hear about this hunt, how it went down, and it'll really highlight all the things we talked about. Let's talk about your setup real quick, what you were running, the components, what you're using for powder, etc., and then how that hunt went.
Yeah, so because Nebraska antelope muzzleloader, this is where we're going. Took what is
5 points.
5 years. Yeah, 5 years putting in for that
As a resident.
to get that tag. This was before, so I started putting in for that before we even talked about board driver ELDX, before that was even a thought. Just happened to line up that year. I'm drawing that tag. We got this bullet made, ready to use. I would have never even considered probably using that setup had it not been for that projectile. It's like, I know 300 yards is in realistic doable here with this setup.
And when you're hunting public land antelope,
Land,
you might not get closer than 300. You hunt private land antelope, you can almost pet the dang thing sometimes. You shooing them out of here. Get out of here. It's weird. It's this bizarre that they know.
So my setup is, like you mentioned, it's a budget build CVA, $290 or whatever it was, 50 cal, obviously. Scope, like you mentioned, I was holding over. It's a
doing
Was it
BDC.
Vortex Viper.
Vortex Viper with BDC reticle, 2.5 to 10.
Okay. It's a nice setup. Really is.
For muzzleloader, and it's still what's on there, still what I use. But I'd been out here, shot that at 300 yards. I was comfortable with that. I was comfortable with knowing the capabilities of that projectile on the load. 82 grains of Blackhorn 209 Wade is what my load is. It's not 84 is max.
Yep.
CCI 209 Magnum primers, and about 1860 is my muzzle velocity. I know that it's pretty dang consistent, and I know exactly where my zero is, and that gave me even put me in the confidence range of, hey, I can take this shot if I have to. I don't necessarily want to, but that we proved that weekend.
Yeah. So you guys went out there, both had the tag.
Yep.
Yeah, trying to do some filming, running around, and you get one found.
We get one found. We find a few.
Yeah, they actually had
a couple stock.
An interesting stock. That was honestly fun to watch. I was on kind of like in an elevated position watching Ryan go down this draw, and I said, if you come out of this draw, he should be right there. And he got a little squirrely towards the end, but never really bolted until crunch time.
But he was,
and that was what, 340 yards?
Yeah, and I can't remember exactly. I was going to say 350, but he was looking right at me.
Yeah.
And I was set up on him. I had him in the scope, and I just wasn't comfortable with that. And then, and there was some wind for sure. It's like, yeah, that's a low.
So you passed the shot.
So I passed a shot.
Good for you.
He boogers out. I'm ticked off and cussing and heading back to the truck.
Tail between your legs. Seen it 100 times. Been there myself.
Yeah, because that took a good chunk of time.
Yeah,
that was stock. I mean, that was like a solid hour plus of just creeping up on that thing. But anyway,
and we glassed for probably an hour before that, watching this buck on private land. All of a sudden, this one comes up and the chase is on.
Okay.
Yeah, they never fought. They just chased.
She's
that was
mine.
really fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Fun to watch. So we drive off, and I don't want to tell your story for you, but I ended up getting one.
Yeah, you ended up smacking one,
and then we're on the way back. We wanted to check another piece, and saw one on some public ground and turned around, and you made a nice stalk on it.
Made a play on it, and then it was up on a hillside with a few does, and the range, the scenario, the landscape, the way it laid out, I wasn't getting any closer. It was on a little knob. He was up on a hill. If I got any closer, they were already onto us.
Yeah, they knew you were there anyway.
But I ranged him at 340 yards. And
Bipod out?
Bipod's out. I'm laying down. The grass is short enough here.
Oh my gosh. That does not happen in the Nebraska sandhills, period, being able to go prone. But like you said, you were on that knob and it dramatically slopes off on the other side.
Yep. And he's on the forward-facing slope valley in between us.
Okay. Bipod legs out, prone, elevated position, ready to roll.
And I knew my drop at 300.
Well, it was in Ford off too.
Yeah, we need to talk about Ford off after the story.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had BDC reticle, and I was holding. I had all that reticle wanted to give me, and a little bit of luck, and pulled the trigger off. And yeah, there was some wind. It wasn't much wind. I think I didn't even.
It was towards evening time, so it died off.
It died off. It was fairly calm, and that was saving grace, I think. But yeah.
And 10-ringed it.
10-ringed him, and you could hear it too. Those bullets are still going, like we said, they're going slow enough. You hear muzzle blast, boom. You count a second or two off, and then wham, you can hear that bullet impact. And he ran, kind of did a few curlicues and tipped over about 40 yards away from where he hit him.
Wow.
I'm going to tell the story a little bit differently.
Okay, let's hear the color commentary.
So I'm in my binoculars at this point.
How'd you get inside them?
Pretty gassed. I'm not it. Well, they're big binoculars. I'm pretty gassed at this point, so I just followed Ryan on the stalk. Didn't even have the camera for whatever reason. Just, I'm an idiot. But I'm watching this through the binoculars, and I see him 10-ring it. He doesn't know that he 10-ringed it. So he 10-ringed it. Ryan's scrambling, trying to get loaded. I'm like, oh, dude, he's going down. No, don't worry. I'm just like, relax. And he finally, tips over after 10 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever it is. Fist pump Ryan Damman, Oh, man, it was a hoot.
And I asked you multiple times, like, is he down?
Oh.
Do I need to load again?
You pulled a loop, Ryan? Tell me he's down. Well, it was a great hunt.
I knew he 10-ringed him, so no worries at all.
And that story right there completely exemplifies everything we just talked about. You already had the muzzleloader. You did a couple things to really set this thing up. You did all your due diligence. You practiced with it. It was dialed in, fiddle string tight, and you were able to go out there, make a great shot, a high probability shot, and the result was, you were able to fill a 5-year wait on a tag on public land in a really tough area to hunt, and that's exactly what we're talking about doing. You don't have to live with the late 90s inline muzzleloader technology. It's 2024. You can do this stuff. And we mentioned Ford off.
Yeah, so I imagine, I can't remember what the elevation is out there. 4,000 something, maybe?
Give or take, yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, here we're 1,800. So Ryan had to do his due diligence once we got out there, or ahead of time, and kind of average the temperature and get an elevation so that his BDC reticle changed from here to there.
Absolutely.
So he had to do all that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a dialable scope, you can put this right into Ford off, and you can use Ford off as you're hunting.
Yeah. And the Ford, that's the amazing part, is it's in Ford off. You just set up your Ford off profile just like normal. You select the bullet you're using. You put in all your variables. Bob's your uncle. You're ready to go, and it will tell you exactly what to dial that scope to. Or if you're using BDC, it'll tell you inches or whatever you select.
Well, you better have your subtensions memorized at that point. Do your due diligence there. But
that is awesome that we have the technology today to do all this stuff.
SnapSafe modular assembly system locks the thick steel exterior together in minutes anywhere in the home. Featuring a pry-resistant 3/16" solid steel door, 8 1-inch chrome steel live locking bolts, digital or mechanical locking options, 9-gauge steel exterior walls, 2300 degree Fahrenheit 1-hour fire shield protection, fully adjustable shelving, and a lifetime warranty. SnapSafe, a modular safe with welded safe security.
And it's a lot of fun. And Ryan, you look back at muzzle loaders as a whole, and there are certain people and companies that have really influenced their popularity and their success. And I hope, fast forward a bunch of years when we look back, your name will be there, that you helped advance an industry through the bore driver, and specifically what we're talking about here, the bore driver ELDX. It's a job well done there.
Appreciate it.
Don't get all teared up or anything. My gosh.
Is there anything else
kind words
in the world of a muzzleloader that you guys want to talk about? I got one final question before I close this out.
You got anything?
Well, we didn't hit on it enough, but the fact that these bullets have consistent enough drag that they can go into the Fordhoff calculator is remarkable.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
That's really what makes them. That's what can extend your range. Besides having the system capable of producing small groups and small spreads, for a calculator to be able to predict
where the
bullet's going to go, that's huge.
Just on that note, recent groups I shot, I think it was like a 8 or 10 shot string or something with those 45 cals, and I had like a 11 foot per second spread.
Yep,
that'll do.
Like, well, yeah, that's pretty good for for a muzzleloader.
That's fantastic.
Well, my question for you before we wrap this up, you got your 50 caliber setup that you used on the muzzleloader hunt. I'm guessing you're going to do some muzzleloader hunting this year. Are you taking that system out, or are you switching over to 45 to use the new one?
As of now, I'm sticking with that.
Okay.
50 cal.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear.
Might change. It's a long season.
Long season it is. Preston and I, 45 cal. Touch blue, make it true.
Yeah, I'm out of tags though.
Oh,
somebody's going to have to do it.
I got a muzzleloader hunt coming up. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for walking us through that. I think that's going to help the listener out, especially coming into the late season muzzleloader type hunts. And there's a lot of states that, they don't get to use a 7 mag. They don't get to use a 30-30. They got to use straight wall or muzzleloader, and stuff like this can really help them just turn things to 11. So thanks for walking us through that.
Ryan's pleasure.
My pleasure.
Right on. Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode about turning your inline muzzleloader into a true precision firearm. We hope you can implement some of the ideas that we talked about here to increase your success out there in the field. Thanks again. We'll catch you on the next one.